Welcome to Sleepless Historian. If you enjoy this journey through time, consider liking and subscribing. And remember to turn on loop, so this gentle narrative can cradle you softly into sleep. Now, let us take a moment to settle into a cozy space. Dim the lights around you. Allow your body to sink deeper into your pillow. Adjust your blanket just so, feeling its comforting weight. Breathe slowly and deeply, letting the day drift away with each exhale. Today, we will explore a rather unremarkable yet intriguing topic: the history of ale measurement standards during medieval times. This is a tale not of grand battles or heroic deeds, but of the repetitive and meticulous ways in which people sought consistency in their daily brews. Picture a time when ale was a staple of life, enjoyed by people from all walks of life. Ale was not simply a drink, but a part of the daily routine. Yet, within this routine lay a tedium, a struggle for uniformity. Little by little, ale was measured in various ways, using tankards of differing sizes. Each village, each tavern had its own standard, often leading to confusion and frustration. We will gently delve into the specifics of these measurements. The tankard, a vessel of many shapes and sizes, varied greatly in capacity. An ale house in one town might serve a pint that was noticeably larger than that from a neighboring town. Imagine the implications of such discrepancies, as patrons sought to understand what they were truly receiving for their coin. Slowly and gently, we will uncover the methods of measuring ale, the routines of the ale brewers, and the slow evolution of standards that emerged over time. Let us embrace the simplicity of these details, the quiet rituals of pouring and consuming, as we journey through this surprisingly complex landscape of medieval life. So, dear listener, relax your shoulders and allow your mind to drift into the past. As we continue, let the mundane wash over you, like the steady flow of ale from a well-measured tankard. Feel the weight of history settle in, slowly and gently, guiding you toward a peaceful slumber. As we drift deeper into the tranquil waters of medieval ale measurement, let us take note of the tools and materials that shaped this humble industry. The tankard itself, a common vessel, was typically constructed from wood, pewter, or clay. Each material brought its own unique qualities to the experience of drinking ale. Wooden tankards had a comforting warmth, while pewter offered a shiny, smooth surface. Clay, on the other hand, provided a rustic charm, its earthy tones a reminder of the land from which the grains were harvested. The size of these tankards varied significantly, often influenced by local customs and the preferences of the ale brewers. In some villages, a standard tankard might hold a full quart, while in others it could be a mere pint. The inconsistency could lead to perplexity for the weary traveler arriving at a tavern after a long day. Imagine the moment as he lifts the tankard to his lips, savoring the rich, frothy ale, yet wondering if his tankard truly held the same amount as that of the innkeeper from the neighboring town. Little by little, the traveler would learn to gauge the weight of the tankard in his hand, the slosh of the liquid inside, and the feel of the ale warming against his palms. Now let us explore the routines of the ale brewers themselves, who toiled diligently to meet the demands of their patrons. Brewing ale was an intricate process, often involving the careful selection of grains. Barley, wheat, and rye were the most common choices, each contributing its own flavor profile to the final brew. The grains were often soaked in water and allowed to germinate, a process called malting. This stage required precise timing, for too much moisture could spoil the grains, while too little would yield a less flavorful ale. Once the grains had reached the perfect state, they were dried in a kiln, a step that would seal in the essential sugars needed for fermentation. The brewers would then grind the dried grains into a coarse flour, known as grist. This flour would be combined with hot water in a large vessel called a mash tun. As the temperature rose, the starches in the grains would convert into sugars, creating a sweet liquid known as wort. This process, delicate and methodical, often required the attention of the brewer for several hours. With each passing moment, the aromas of the brewing ale would fill the air, inviting patrons to linger, chatting softly over wooden tables, eagerly awaiting their first taste of the day. As the wort simmered, the brewer would prepare to add hops, another essential ingredient. Hops provided a bitter balance to the sweetness of the wort, while also acting as a natural preservative. In towns where hops were scarce, brewers often relied on local herbs and spices, each village developing its own unique recipes. The addition of spices would bring distinct flavors, reflecting the land and culture from which they originated. It was common for alehouses to advertise their specialties, perhaps with a simple sign, hand-painted and hung above the door. Once the hops were added and the brewing process complete, the wort would be cooled and transferred to fermentation vessels. These vessels could be large wooden casks, or even earthenware pots, depending on the resources available to the brewer. Fermentation was a slow process, requiring a gentle environment and careful monitoring. Brewers would often check the temperature and sugar levels daily, ensuring that the yeast was working effectively. During this time, the ale would transform. Tiny bubbles would form, and the liquid would gradually take on a golden hue. This process of fermentation could last anywhere from several days to several weeks, depending on the desired strength of the ale. It was a time of anticipation, as the brewer watched over their creation, perhaps making notes in a small ledger, recording the variations of each batch. As fermentation concluded, it was time to prepare for storage. The ale, now ready to be enjoyed, was carefully siphoned into clean tankards or casks. A practiced hand ensured that no sediment lingered at the bottom, preserving the clarity of the drink. The tankards would then be lined up, each filled to the brim, ready for the eager customers who would soon fill the alehouse. One might wonder about the pricing of these various brews, which could fluctuate based on the ingredients used and the size of the tankard. In bustling towns, a pint of ale might cost a simple penny, while a richer, more complex brew could demand a bit more. Little by little, patrons learned to navigate these prices, often deciding on their drink based on the weight of their coin purse and the size of the tankards before them. Etiquette played a subtle yet important role in the alehouse, a dance of social interaction that was performed daily. When entering, it was customary to greet the innkeeper with a nod or a simple good day. Patrons would take their place at the bar, patiently awaiting their turn. The pouring of ale was a ritual in itself. The innkeeper, with a practiced hand, would lift the tankard, tilting it slightly as the ale flowed in. It was essential to fill the tankard to the correct level, stopping just shy of the brim. This ensured that the drinker could savor the aroma without spilling. As the ale settled, patrons would take a moment to admire the frothy head, perhaps running a finger along the rim before bringing it to their lips. Slowly and gently, the rituals of drinking began. Sips were taken with care, and conversation flowed in quiet tones. The alehouse created a haven for those seeking warmth on a chilly evening, where laughter mingled with the clinking of tankards, yet the atmosphere remained serene and inviting. Away. Wes. As night fell, the flickering candlelight cast soft shadows across the wooden beams of the tavern. Patrons would linger, often settling into their tankards for the evening, allowing time to pass like the gentle waves of ale coursing through their cups. And it said again, if I see him, a sea. And ye, a sigwa, do you. In the corners, groups would gather, sharing stories of the day, while others sat in comfortable silence, lost in thought. The ambient sounds of the alehouse enveloped them, a soft murmur of voices, the occasional clatter of utensils, and the satisfying pour of ale into tankards. I see. Wow. As we contemplate this serene atmosphere, let us remember the humble tankard, a vessel connecting the past with the present. Each sip of ale was a moment shared, a connection forged within the community. The quest for uniformity in measurement may have been exasperating, yet it fostered a landscape rich with warmth, camaraderie, and the daily rhythms of life. Nay. So, dear listener, take a deep breath and allow the soothing details of this world to wash over you. As we move forward, let the gentle cadence of our exploration guide you into a peaceful state. The tankards, the brewers, the rituals, they all blend together, creating a tapestry of history that invites you to unwind and let go. In the heart of the alehouse, the wooden tables were often marked by the passage of time. Each table bore its own story, a tapestry of scratches and dents, each one a silent witness to the countless tankards that had rested upon its surface. These tables were typically hewn from oak, their grains swirling in gentle patterns, giving each piece a unique character. The tankards themselves, made from a variety of materials, wood, pewter, and sometimes glass, were designed to hold the ale in a manner that was both practical and inviting. The standard tankard held a measurement of ale known as a pint. However, the definition of a pint varied widely across different regions. In some places, a pint was simply a vessel that could hold a certain amount, estimated at around 20 fluid ounces. In other locations, the pint could be closer to 18 ounces, or even less. The discrepancies were often the result of local customs, which shaped the very nature of measurement in the medieval world. As brewers began to establish their craft, they relied on simple tools to measure their ingredients. Scales would often be used, crafted from wood and metal, with weights made from stones or shaped pieces of metal. These scales were not always precise, yet they served their purpose, allowing brewers to create batches of ale that would satisfy their patrons. Measuring grains, hops, and water was a meticulous affair, requiring patience and a careful eye. Brewers would begin their day early, often as dawn broke over the horizon. They would gather their materials, preparing to embark on the brewing process. First, they would measure out their grains. Barley was the most common, although other grains such as wheat and oats were also used. A typical batch of ale might require anywhere from a quarter to a half bushel of grains. Once the grains were measured, they would be milled, a process that involved grinding the grains into a coarse flour known as grist. This was typically done using a hand-cranked mill, a device that required both strength and dexterity. As the millstones turned, the grains would be transformed, filling the air with the sweet smell of malt. After milling, the next step was to mash the grist. This involved mixing the milled grains with hot water, allowing the starches to convert into sugars. The temperature of the water was crucial. It typically needed to be around 150 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Maintaining this temperature was a delicate balance, as too hot or too cold could affect the outcome of the brew. Well, as the mash sat, the brewer would often engage in other tasks. This could involve cleaning the brewing equipment, tending to the fire that heated the water, or simply taking a moment to rest. The process of mashing could take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, during which time the brewer would be attentive, watching for the right consistency and aroma. Once the mashing was complete, the next stage was to separate the liquid from the solid grain. This was done through a process known as lautering. The mash would be transferred to a vessel called a tun, where the liquid, now rich with sugars, would be drained away. Breathers of steam would escape, filling the air with the fragrant scent of the brewing ale. The solid grains left behind, known as spent grains, would not go to waste. They were often used to feed livestock or could be sold for a small price at the local market. This practice of utilizing every part of the brewing process was important, a testament to the resourcefulness of the medieval brewer. The liquid, now called wort, would then be boiled in a large cauldron. Hops were added at this stage, contributing bitterness and aroma to the ale. The boiling process could last from 1 to 2 hours as the wort simmered and bubbled, transforming into a fragrant concoction. During this time, the brewer would keep a watchful eye. The boiling process required attention, as any overflow could lead to a mess, and any uneven heat could affect the flavor profile. The cauldron would typically sit over a wood fire, the flames dancing and casting a warm glow. Dig. Once the boiling was complete, the wort would be cooled down before transferring it to fermentation vessels. The cooling process was essential, as it would help to prepare the wort for the addition of yeast. Cooling was often facilitated by pouring the hot liquid into shallow troughs or using cool water to bring down the temperature. After cooling, the yeast was introduced. This tiny organism was responsible for the fermentation process, turning the sugars in the wort into alcohol. The fermentation would take several days, during which the brewer would monitor the activity, looking for signs of bubbling or froth. The fermentation vessels were often wooden barrels or large clay jars, carefully sealed to prevent contamination. Each barrel was marked with the date of brewing and the brewer's initials, a simple system of organization that allowed for tracking different batches. Once fermentation was complete, the ale would be siphoned off into smaller containers for serving. This could involve careful pouring to avoid disturbing the sediment that settled at the bottom. The ale was then ready for storage, or for serving in the tavern. As the evening approached, the alehouse would begin to fill with patrons. Tankards would be filled, the sound of clinking metal and wood creating a gentle symphony. Each tankard would be filled to a specific measure, often topping off at the rim to ensure a generous serving. Midion. The etiquette surrounding drinking was as important as the ale itself. Patrons would raise their tankards in a toast, a gesture of goodwill and camaraderie. The act of drinking together was a ritual, a moment to connect, a moment to share. Wine. Throughout the evening, the rhythm of drinking and storytelling would carry on. Each sip of ale was a small moment of enjoyment, a connection to the past. The tankards, each filled to a different height, would tell their own stories, reflecting the variations in brewing practices and regional preferences. As our exploration continues, let us pause for a moment. Allow your thoughts to drift like the soft foam atop a freshly poured tankard. The details of brewing, the rituals of drinking, and the warmth of community are all woven together in this tapestry of history. Take a deep breath and settle into this moment, letting the calmness of the past embrace you gently. Here, in the alehouse, we find a world that thrives on simplicity. The measurements, the tools, the routines, all serve to remind us of the beauty in the mundane. Each tankard, each drop of ale, carries with it the weight of countless stories, all waiting to be shared in the soft glow of candlelight. Now, as we continue our journey through this history, let the soothing rhythm of the details lull you into a state of relaxation. Each sentence flows gently into the next, like a stream of ale, inviting you to unwind and let go. As we delve deeper into the world of medieval ale measurement, let us consider the tools and materials that played a vital role in this seemingly unexciting yet intricate aspect of daily life. Picture the humble tankard, a vessel made of wood or pewter, each one slightly different in size and shape. Some artisans crafted tankards with a sturdy handle, while others created simple, smooth designs, each reflecting the artisan's skill and the local resources available. These tankards were often carefully measured against established standards, although those standards varied significantly from one region to another. The most common measurement for ale was the pint, yet the size of a pint was not uniform. In some places, a pint could mean as little as 20 ounces, while in others, it might stretch to 32 ounces. This variation could lead to confusion among patrons who, after all, expected a drink to quench their thirst. The process of measuring ale before it was poured into tankards was quite meticulous. A cooper, an expert in crafting wooden barrels and containers, would use a measuring stick, known as a yardstick or a pint stick. This stick was often crafted from sturdy wood, marked at various intervals to denote each specific measurement. The cooper would carefully align the tankard against the stick, ensuring that it met the required volume. This careful attention to detail was essential, as the price of ale could fluctuate based on the amount being served. For example, in the 13th century, ale was sold by the gallon or the quart. A gallon of ale might cost a few pence, while a quart could be a fraction of that price. The price of ale was not merely a number. It reflected the quality of ingredients and the brewing process itself. The cost of barley, hops, and yeast would influence the final price of the ale. Brewers needed to account for these variables, which required a keen understanding of both the market and the brewing process. Storage was another critical aspect of medieval ale production. Once brewed, ale was typically stored in wooden barrels, known as firkins or kilderkins. A firkin could hold around 10.5 gallons, while a kilderkin was slightly larger at 21 gallons. These barrels were often kept in cool, dark cellars, where the temperature remained stable. The importance of proper storage cannot be overstated, as it directly impacted the flavor and quality of the ale. Brewers often had specific schedules for brewing, ensuring that the ale was ready in time for seasonal festivals or local gatherings. The brewing process itself could take several weeks, beginning with the careful selection of grains and the precise measurement of water. A typical brewing session required about 100 gallons of water, which was heated in a large cauldron over an open fire. This water was then mixed with malted barley, allowing it to steep and release sugars. The process continued with the addition of hops, which not only added flavor, but also acted as a natural preservative. Each ingredient played a role, and the brewer's experience guided the process. The mixture would then be allowed to ferment for several days, watched over carefully. Once fermentation was complete, the ale was carefully drawn from the barrel using a ladle or a siphon. The ladle, often made of wood or metal, would scoop the ale from the bottom of the barrel, minimizing the disturbance of any sediment that had settled. This process required patience, as clarity of the ale was a desirable quality. Next, the ale was poured into the tankards, but not without a moment of ritual. Patrons often observed the pouring, appreciating the frothy head that formed atop the ale. This moment of anticipation was part of the experience, as the sound of ale rushing into the tankard created a soothing rhythm. Slowly and gently, the tankard would fill, the foam rising just to the brim, but never spilling over. Once filled, patrons would engage in a subtle yet significant form of etiquette. It was customary to raise the tankard slightly above the table before taking the first sip. This gesture was not simply for show. It signified respect for the ale and the community gathered. The act of toasting, often with phrases such as "to your health," was a way to bond with fellow drinkers. This simple act of raising a tankard held deep meaning, connecting individuals to one another and to the shared experience of enjoying ale. As the evening progressed, the tankards would be refilled, and stories would flow just as freely as the ale. Conversations would meander like the gentle streams that nourish the barley fields, bringing to life tales of harvests, family, and local events. Each tankard raised in the air, each sip taken with care, resonated with history. In the corner of the alehouse, an elderly man might be seen polishing tankards, preparing them for the next day's patrons. His movements were methodical, each stroke of the cloth a reminder of the passage of time. He understood the importance of maintaining the vessels that brought joy to so many. This daily routine, though seemingly mundane, was one of the many threads that wove the fabric of community life. Meanwhile, the alehouse itself was a place of comfort and warmth. The wooden beams overhead were darkened with age, and the flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls. The air was filled with the gentle aroma of ale, mingling with the scent of baked bread and roasted meats. As patrons settled into their seats, they became part of a cycle that had persisted for generations. The act of drinking ale was not just about quenching thirst. It was about connection, community, and the shared experience of life. Each tankard filled, each toast made, became a building block of social fabric, linking the past to the present. While we gather these details, let us take a moment to breathe deeply. Inhale slowly, feeling the cool air fill your lungs, and then exhale gently, releasing the weight of the day. Let the soothing rhythm of this history wash over you like the gentle waves lapping at the shore. As we reflect on the meticulous routines of brewing and drinking, we find comfort in the simplicity of these practices. The measurements, the tools, the gatherings, all reflect a world where community thrived on the steady beat of daily life. Each tankard, each drop of ale, a reminder of the connections forged in the warmth of shared moments, in the soft glow of flickering candlelight, slowly and gently, bringing us closer to the essence of human experience. Hey, enjoy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the warm glow of candlelight flickered across wooden tables, illuminating the simple yet essential tools of the brewing trade. In the heart of a medieval alehouse, the essential instruments lay ready, awaiting the hands of skilled brewers. These artisans, custodians of tradition, meticulously measured each ingredient, ensuring a consistency that patrons relied upon. Oh, the first of these tools was the ale measure itself, a wooden vessel often crafted from sturdy oak. This measure, sometimes called a quart or a gallon, varied in size depending on the region. A quart typically held 2 pints or 4 cups, while a gallon contained 8 pints, inviting the drinker to share in the experience of communal enjoyment. The measures were marked with careful notches, indicating the capacity. These notches were not merely for decoration. They served as a lifeline to accuracy, aiding in the brewing process. Brewers, guided by long-standing traditions, would gather their ingredients with diligence. Barley, the primary grain, was often malted before use, soaking it in water for several days. This process, known as malting, allowed enzymes to break down starches into sugars. Once completed, the grains were dried in a kiln, giving them a toasty aroma. The weight of the barley was carefully recorded, typically measured in bushels, which could hold anywhere from 32 to 64 pounds, depending on local standard. Next came the hops. These delicate green cones, harvested from the hop plant, were essential for adding both bitterness and aroma to the ale. A standard measure of hops was often a handful, or in more precise contexts, an ounce. This small quantity could make a significant difference in the flavor profile of the finished brew. The brewer's choice of hops, whether Fuggle, Goldings, or another variety, spoke to their experience and the preferences of their patrons. Water, the most plentiful element, was drawn from local sources. It was essential to ensure that the water was clean and fresh, as it served as the foundation of the ale. In some towns, the water was prized for its unique mineral content, while in others, it could be less desirable. The amount of water varied, often calculated by the weight of the grains to maintain the correct balance. For every bushel of barley, a brewer might use 3 to 4 barrels of water, creating a harmonious blend. The brewing process itself unfolded with methodical precision. First, the malted barley was crushed, creating what was known as grist. This grist was then mixed with hot water in a large vessel called a mash tun. The temperature was crucial. Typically, it hovered around 150 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. This heat activated the enzymes, converting the starches into fermentable sugars. The mixture would rest for 1 to 2 hours, allowing the sugars to seep into the water, creating a sweet liquid known as wort. Once the wort was extracted, it was transferred to the kettle, where it was boiled and hops were introduced. The boiling process usually lasted for an hour, with the brewer carefully timing the addition of hops based on the desired bitterness. A gentle stir was often employed, ensuring that the hops were evenly dispersed throughout the bubbling mixture. This stage was a dance of patience and precision, as the brewer awaited the transformation that would ultimately yield their ale. After boiling, the wort was cooled, often using a simple cooling coil, or by transferring it into a cool, shaded area. Once at the right temperature, usually around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, it was time to introduce yeast. Yeast, a tiny organism, was vital for fermentation. A brewer would typically use a measure of yeast that could fit into the palm of their hand. This little addition would begin the magic of transforming sugars into alcohol, a process that required anywhere from a few days to several weeks, depending on the type of ale being produced. As fermentation progressed, the brewer would monitor the process, taking care to keep the ale in a cool, dark place. This was often a cellar or a specially designated room where the temperature remained stable. The ale would quietly bubble and froth, a gentle reminder of the life brewing within. After fermentation, the ale was clarified, often by allowing it to settle in another vessel. This step could take several days, as the sediment fell to the bottom, leaving a clearer liquid above. Once clarified, the ale was ready for storage. Wooden barrels, often crafted from oak or chestnut, were the vessels of choice. These barrels, with their sturdy constructions, could hold various volumes, from a pint to several gallons. They were sealed with a tight-fitting bung, protecting the ale from contaminants. The barrels were carefully marked, noting the date of brewing and the type of ale contained within. This attention to detail ensured that the ale was consumed at its best. As patrons arrived at the alehouse, they were greeted by the sight of barrels stacked in rows, each one promising a unique blend of flavors. The etiquette surrounding the serving of ale was equally important. A tavern keeper would often pour ale into tankards, taking care to fill each one to the brim, ensuring that every patron felt welcomed and valued. It was customary to serve ale with respect, often offering a small taste before filling the tankard completely. This gesture was a mark of hospitality, a recognition of the importance of each individual's experience. The price of ale varied, dictated by the local economy and the quality of the brew. A pint might cost a few pence, while a more refined ale could command a higher price. This pricing structure not only reflected the ingredients, but also the skill of the brewer. As patrons sipped their ale, they engaged in conversation, sharing stories and laughter, each tankard a vessel of connection. In this world of measurements, procedures, and social rituals, the act of brewing and sharing ale was a practice steeped in history. The tools of the trade, the careful measurements, and the routines that governed the brewing process created a comforting rhythm. Each step, from the weighing of barley to the final pour, contributed to a tapestry of community life that has echoed through the ages. Slowly and gently, we can appreciate the mundane details that bind us to the past. The simple act of measuring, brewing, and sharing, weaving a narrative that transcends time. Each tankard filled, each gathering celebrated, a reflection of the enduring human spirit, eternally rooted in the comforting embrace of ale white. As we drift further into the soothing realm of medieval ale, we find ourselves enveloped in the gentle rituals that surrounded its production and consumption. Each step in the brewing process was carefully orchestrated, a dance of precision and patience. The heart of this process lay in the special tools and materials, each serving a purpose that contributed to the creation of this cherished drink. To begin, we must consider the primary ingredient: barley. Barley grains were often measured in quarters, which equated to 8 bushels. Each bushel would typically weigh around 60 pounds, a weight significant enough to ensure a good yield. When the barley was harvested, it was stored in large sacks, often made from burlap or cloth. These sacks were kept in dry, cool places, protected from dampness and pests. Once the barley was ready for brewing, it would be soaked in water, a process known as malting. This soaking allowed the grains to germinate. As the grains sprouted, they released enzymes that converted starches into sugars, a crucial transformation for fermentation. After a few days, the grains were dried in a kiln. This was an important step, as it determined the flavor and color of the final brew. The drying process could take up to 3 days, a methodical timeline that required careful attention. After malting, the grains were crushed using a tool called a mill. This device, often hand-powered or operated by a horse, ground the grains into a coarse powder known as grist. The grist was then mixed with hot water in a vessel called a mash tun. This vessel had a false bottom, allowing the liquid to drain while keeping the solid grains above. The temperature of the water was crucial, typically around 150 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, allowing the enzymes to work their magic. This mashing process could last from 1 to 2 hours, during which time the sweet liquid, known as wort, slowly separated from the solids. Once enough wort had been collected, it was transferred to a kettle. Here, the wort would be boiled, and hops would be added. Hops, with their delicate bitterness and aromatic qualities, serve to balance the sweetness of the malt. The boiling process also sterilized the wort, ensuring that no unwanted bacteria would spoil the brew. This boiling could take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, as the flavors melded and deepened. After boiling, the wort needed to cool, transitioning from the kettle to a fermentation vessel. This vessel was usually made of wood or earthenware, crafted to allow for the gradual release of gases produced during fermentation. Once cooled, yeast was added, a tiny organism that would convert sugars into alcohol. The fermentation process could take several days to weeks, depending on various factors such as temperature and the type of yeast used. During this time, the ale would bubble and bubble, transforming slowly and gently into the beloved beverage. As the ale matured, it was crucial to monitor its progress, observing its clarity and aroma. When the fermentation was complete, the ale was racked, which meant transferring it from the fermentation vessel to another container, leaving the sediment behind. This step ensured a clearer final product. Now, let us consider the storage of the ale. Casks, barrels, or kegs made of wood were the preferred vessels for storing ale. These containers were often made from oak, prized for its durability and ability to impart subtle flavors to the ale. A standard cask could hold anywhere from 10 to 30 gallons, a sizable amount that could sustain a tavern for several days. Barrels were kept in cool cellars, where the temperature remained stable, protecting the ale from spoilage. The etiquette surrounding ale was as important as the brewing process itself. In a tavern, patrons would take turns filling their tankards from the communal cask. To avoid conflict, it was customary to wait for one's turn, allowing each person to enjoy their ale in peace. This practice fostered camaraderie among patrons as they shared stories and laughter, creating bonds over their shared experience. To ensure fairness, many taverns employed measures to regulate the amount of ale served. The measurement of a pint was often marked on the side of the tankard, ensuring that patrons received an ample serving for their pence. A pint typically contained 20 fluid ounces, a comforting quantity that allowed for leisurely sipping. The tankards themselves were crafted from materials like wood, metal, or clay, each offering a unique tactile experience. Shelly. As patrons enjoyed their ale, they often adhered to specific customs. It was polite to raise one's tankard and toast before taking a sip. This act of acknowledgement created a moment of unity, a shared appreciation for the drink and the company. The sound of tankards clinking together resonated in the tavern, creating a melodic backdrop to conversations that flowed as freely as the ale itself. In the realm of pricing, the cost of ale was often determined by quality and locality. A common ale, brewed with less care, might be offered at a modest price, while a fine, well-crafted ale could command a premium. Prices varied from town to town, influenced by local economics and the availability of ingredients. As we drift deeper into this world, we can imagine the rhythmic exchange of coins, the soft clinking of metal against wood, a gentle reminder of the transactions that underpin community life. The routine of ale consumption was also predictable. Many townsfolk would gather at their local taverns at dusk after a long day of work. They would settle into their favorite spots, the worn wooden benches welcoming them like old friends. The atmosphere, filled with the warm glow of candlelight, added to the serenity of the evening. Conversations flowed, punctuated by laughter and the occasional cheer as patrons raised their tankards high. In this comforting routine, the act of enjoying ale became an integral part of daily life. It was not merely a drink, but a vessel for connection, a means of unwinding after a day of toil. Each sip was savored, each moment cherished, as the community thrived in the simple pleasures of life. As we reflect on these details, let us continue to appreciate the mundane, the steady heartbeat of brewing and sharing ale. Each tool, each measurement, each ritual woven together to create a soothing experience that resonates through time. Slowly and gently, we find ourselves drawn into the warmth of history, anchored by the threads of daily life. As the evening deepens, let us now explore the tools of the brewing trade, the instruments that shaped the very nature of ale. The brewing process was as much an art as it was a science, requiring a collection of simple yet essential tools. Each tool had its purpose, its role in the quiet symphony of brewing. The mash tun, a large vessel, held the crushed grains, soaking them in warm water. This was no hasty process. It required patience. The grains would steep, releasing their sugars into the water, a gradual transformation that took anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. While the mash rested, brewers would take the time to prepare their next steps, measuring out hops with care. Hops, those delicate green flowers, were integral for flavor and preservation. Typically, a brewer would use about 1 ounce of hops per gallon of ale, a careful measurement that ensured each batch would have its distinctive taste. The hops would be added at different stages, some early in the boil, others towards the end, creating a layered flavor profile. Once the mash was complete, the wort would be transferred to the kettle. This act required a large, long-handled paddle, known as a mash paddle. The paddle, often made of sturdy wood, would stir the mixture, ensuring even distribution and promoting the release of sugars. The wort was then brought to a gentle boil, a process that lasted about an hour. Steam would rise, filling the air with earthy aromas, a sign of the magic taking place within the kettle. After boiling, the wort had to be cooled rapidly before fermentation could begin. For this, brewers often employed a large cooling vessel, sometimes made of copper or tin, which would sit in a cool stream or be surrounded by cold water. This time-consuming task could take several hours, but was essential to ensure the yeast would thrive when introduced. Now, let us consider the yeast, that tiny organism responsible for fermentation. Brewers often use different strains, chosen for their ability to impart unique flavors and aromas to the ale. A little less than a packet of yeast, which could weigh around an ounce, was typically adequate for 5 gallons of wort. The yeast would multiply, converting sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide, a process that unfolded over several days. For many, this was a time of waiting. The fermentation vessel, often a simple wooden barrel or a clay pot, would be sealed with a cloth or a cork, allowing gases to escape while keeping contaminants at bay. This period of fermentation usually lasted about 1 to 2 weeks, during which brewers would check for signs of bubbling, a reassuring indication that the yeast was at work. As fermentation concluded, the ale was ready for racking, a process in which the clear liquid was siphoned off from the sediment that settled at the bottom. This required a carefully crafted siphon, often made from a long tube, which allowed brewers to transfer the ale without disturbing the sediment. The ale was then placed in clean barrels, often made of oak, which imparted subtle flavors as it aged. Storage was equally important. Barrels were typically stored in cool, dark cellars, where the temperature remained relatively constant. Wooden barrels allowed for a gentle breathing process, enhancing the flavor of the ale over time. The storage space was meticulously organized, with each barrel carefully labeled, noting the date of brewing and the type of ale contained within. Now, let us turn our attention to the measurement of ale. In a time before standardized containers, ale was often sold by the pint or the quart. Pint mugs, typically made of pewter or wood, held approximately 20 fluid ounces. Quarts, containing twice that amount, were less commonly used for individual consumption, but provided a practical measure for larger gatherings. The tankard was a favored choice amongst many. These vessels varied in size and style, often featuring intricate designs crafted by skilled artisans. A standard tankard could hold about 16 ounces, but variations existed, reflecting local customs and preferences. When purchasing ale, transactions were often conducted with small coins, the value of which fluctuated depending on the region and the quality of the ale. A pint might cost anywhere from a halfpenny to a full penny, depending on the establishment and the ale's reputation. Taverns, those lively hubs of community life, served as the primary locations for ale consumption. Each tavern had its own atmosphere, its own rhythm, often dictated by the clientele and the time of day. The tavern keeper played an essential role, not only in serving ale but also in maintaining the social fabric of the community. They would engage patrons in conversation, mediating disputes and fostering connections among strangers. The etiquette of ale consumption was equally notable. It was customary for patrons to greet one another with a polite nod or a friendly smile. Sharing a tankard was a gesture of camaraderie, bridging gaps between neighbors and friends alike. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the tavern transformed into a warm refuge from the chill of the evening air. Patrons would settle into their favorite spots, the comforting aroma of ale wafting through the room, mingling with the scents of freshly baked bread and hearty stews. Conversations would ebb and flow, punctuated by the gentle clinking of tankards. The act of raising a tankard was not merely a celebration, but a ritual connecting individuals to the larger tapestry of town life. Each toast was a reaffirmation of bonds, a recognition of shared experiences. In this slow, soothing rhythm, we find the essence of a community intertwined with the art of brewing. The process of measuring, brewing, and sharing ale was not just a series of tasks, but a way of life, rich with routine and familiarity. As we drift deeper into the details of ale measurement and consumption, let us savor the simplicity of these moments. Each step, each tool, each interaction serves to remind us of the beauty found in the ordinary. Slowly and gently, we embrace the harmonious flow of history, where every sip and every gathering weaves a tale of togetherness and tranquility. As the evening deepens, we turn our attention to the intricate world of ale measurement, a realm often overlooked yet profoundly significant in its simplicity. Picture, if you will, the tools of the trade that a medieval brewer would employ. Each tool, each vessel, held a purpose. The wooden measuring stick, known as a tapper, was a slender pole often marked with notches. These notches indicated the varying volumes of ale within a barrel or cask. The tapper, crafted from sturdy oak or ash, was not just a tool but an extension of the brewer's hand. When dipped into a cask, it would reveal the depth of the brew, allowing the brewer to gauge how much ale remained. The oak, with its rich grain and earthy scent, would absorb the essence of the ale, becoming part of the very flavor profile of the brew defiled. Measuring the volume of ale was essential for both production and sale. In a bustling tavern, it was customary for ale to be sold by the pint or the quart. A pint, in medieval terms, was typically defined as a measure of 16 fluid ounces, while a quart contained twice that amount. Brewers and tavern keepers relied on standardized containers to ensure consistency. The pint pot, a sturdy vessel often made of pewter or ceramic, would be filled with ale, its sides smooth to the touch. The quart jug, larger and more robust, would hold double the amount. Patrons would expect that a pint was indeed a pint, and a quart was a quart. This expectation of uniformity extended to the very act of brewing. A brewer would carefully calculate the quantities of malt, hops, and water, each ingredient meticulously weighed. The malt, with its warm, toasty aroma, would be ground into a coarse flour before being mixed with boiling water. This mixture, known as the mash, would steep for a specific duration, typically around 1 hour. During this time, the brewer would attend to the fermentation process. Yeast, that tiny yet powerful organism, would be introduced to the cooled wort, initiating the transformation from sugary liquid to effervescent ale. This process could take several days, depending on the desired strength and flavor profile. Once fermentation was complete, the ale would be stored in casks, often made of oak. These casks, each holding varying amounts, would be lined in a cool, dark place, allowing the flavors to mature and meld together. This maturation period could last weeks or even months, depending on the brewer's intent. As the ale aged, the brewer would occasionally draw a sample, using a small dipper to spoon out a taste. This simple act would become a time-honored ritual, a moment of reflection on the evolving character of the brew. Each sample would be savored, the flavors examined, and notes taken. The importance of measurement extended beyond production. In taverns, patrons would expect fair servings, and the role of the tavern keeper was pivotal. They would ensure that each tankard was filled to the brim, a visual affirmation of value. Regulars would come to trust the tavern keeper, knowing that their tankards would always be filled appropriately. Etiquette played a significant role in the consumption of ale. When entering a tavern, it was customary to greet the tavern keeper with a nod or a friendly word. Once seated, a patron would patiently await their tankard, appreciating the ambiance of the room, the flickering candlelight, the sound of laughter, and the aroma of hearty dishes. When the tankard arrived, it would be filled with a frothy beverage, the ale bubbling gently at the rim. The act of drinking was often a communal experience. Patrons would raise their tankards together, the clinking of pewter resonating softly, a harmonious sound that echoed throughout the tavern. Each sip was taken slowly. The rich, malty flavor would dance on the palate, warming the soul. A moment of silence would often follow, a shared appreciation for the brew that had been crafted with care. In this tranquil atmosphere, the time spent sipping ale was not hurried. It was quite common for patrons to linger, enjoying the company of friends and the comforting presence of ale. Conversations would ebb and flow, punctuated by the gentle clink of tankards and the soft rustle of straw underfoot. Tavern keepers would often move about, ensuring that each patron had their fill. The ale itself, a product of time and labor, was often a topic of discussion. Regulars would compare brews from different towns, sharing stories of their travels and the distinct flavors they encountered. This exchange of tales added to the richness of the experience, creating a tapestry of communal history woven through the simple act of drinking. As the evening wore on, the tavern would settle into a serene rhythm. The flickering candlelight cast warm shadows on the walls, and the gentle hum of conversation became a lullaby for those within. Patrons would often take their time, savoring each sip and each moment, feeling the weight of the day lift with each tankard raised. The price of ale varied from town to town, influenced by the availability of ingredients and local customs. A standard price might be a few pennies for a pint, a modest fee reflecting both the quality and the craftsmanship involved. As patrons exchanged coins for their tankards, there was a sense of fairness in the transaction, an acknowledgement of the labor behind each brew. Tavern keepers would often keep meticulous records of sales, noting the quantities of ale dispensed each evening. These records were vital for ensuring that the brews remained consistent and that the business flourished. A well-kept ledger could mean the difference between a thriving establishment and one that struggled to survive. In the quiet corners of the tavern, regulars would often find their favorite spots, each seat a familiar embrace. Here, they could enjoy the comfort of routine, the predictability of their tankard, and the gently flowing conversations that became a balm for the soul. As we immerse ourselves deeper into this world of ale measurement and consumption, let us cherish the mundane details that create the fabric of life. The wooden tapper, the pewter tankard, the warm glow of candlelight. Each element contributes to a sense of calm, a reminder of the beauty found in simplicity. Slowly and gently, we find peace in this historical tapestry, where the quest for consistency in brewing becomes a soothing lullaby, inviting us to relax and drift further into tranquility. As we meander further into the realm of medieval ale measurement, we come to understand the essential tools and materials that shape the brewing process. Each tool carried with it a purpose, a role in the rhythmic dance of ale production. The wooden mash tun, crafted from aged oak, would serve as the heart of the brewing operation. Its sturdy structure held the grain and water, allowing them to mingle for hours, slowly converting starches into sugars. This process, known as mashing, typically took place over a span of 2 to 3 hours, during which the aroma of the sweetened wort would begin to rise, filling the air with anticipation. Once the mashing was complete, the next step involved the gentle transfer of the sweet wort to the kettle. Here, it would be boiled with hops, those delicate flowers that added bitterness and aroma to the beverage. Hops, measured with care, were often weighed in small sacks, each containing precisely 20 ounces. The boiling process could last anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, creating a bubbling cauldron of fragrant liquid. The boil was a critical stage, as it played a vital role in sanitizing the wort, ensuring that it was free from unwanted bacteria. Following the boil, the hot liquid needed to be cooled swiftly. Brewers would employ large, shallow cooling vessels, often made of copper, allowing the heat to dissipate more effectively. This cooling process, which could take up to an hour, added an element of patience to the brewing routine. Slowly and gently, the wort would transition to a temperature suitable for fermentation. Fermentation, that magical transformation, required the addition of yeast. Brewers would often keep a stock of high-quality yeast in clay jars, each labeled carefully. The yeast would awaken, consuming the sugars and releasing carbon dioxide and alcohol in return. This stage could take a full week, sometimes longer, marked by the gentle bubbling of the liquid as the fermentation progressed. Regular checks were essential, and brewers would often dip a ladle into the fermenting barrel, sampling the evolving flavors, ensuring that the ale developed as intended. Once fermentation was complete, it was time to transfer the ale to storage barrels. These barrels, constructed from sturdy oak, were often stored in cool, dark cellars to allow the ale to mature. Each barrel could hold approximately 30 gallons, and brewers would mark their barrels with chalk, keeping track of the contents and the date they were filled. As the days turned into weeks, the ale would continue to develop its character, the flavors mingling and deepening. The storage of ale was not merely a matter of convenience. It was a delicate art. Temperature and humidity played crucial roles in the aging process. Brewers understood that a stable environment would yield the best results. They would often rely on the natural coolness of the earth to maintain the right conditions, carefully choosing the location of their cellars. A well-maintained cellar could become the sanctuary of a brewer's finest creations. As the ale matured, the time would come for it to be dispensed. Tavern keepers took great pride in serving their patrons, ensuring that each tankard was filled to the brim. The tankards themselves, often made of pewter or earthenware, were a reflection of the ale's quality. Each tankard held around a pint, a measurement that had become standard over the years, though variations existed. The tavern keeper, with a practiced hand, would fill the tankard to a line etched within, ensuring that each guest received their rightful portion. The etiquette surrounding ale consumption was a vital aspect of tavern culture. Patrons would often approach the bar, removing their hats as a sign of respect. The act of raising a tankard was accompanied by a gentle nod, an acknowledgement of camaraderie and shared enjoyment. Conversations flowed easily, each sip a moment of connection, where laughter and stories intertwined like the grains in a mash tun. Prices for ale varied, often dictated by the quality and the ingredients used. A simple ale might cost just a penny, while more complex brews could demand 2 or even 3 pennies. This pricing structure became a point of interest among regular patrons, who would often compare their favorite brews, discussing the merits of each over the warmth of the hearth's glow. And say, how, why? The tavern keeper, embodying the spirit of hospitality, would keep a watchful eye on the room, ensuring that all guests felt welcome and content. This careful attention to detail extended to the maintenance of the tavern itself. Each evening, before the doors swung open, the keeper would sweep the floor, wipe the tables, and light the candles, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. As the night unfolded, the routine of serving ale became almost hypnotic. The sound of tankards clinking, the gentle laughter of patrons, and the soft crackle of the fire created a symphony of comfort. Each drink served was a moment of connection, a simple act of sharing. The routine was soothing, almost ceremonial, as the tankards were filled and emptied, one after the other, in a slow and steady rhythm. Ooh. Throughout the evening, the tavern keeper would occasionally pause, allowing the room to breathe. They would listen to the conversations that filled the air, taking note of the preferences of each patron. This attention to detail ensured that everyone felt valued, creating a sense of belonging within the walls of the tavern. As the night wore on, the tavern would gradually quiet, the last patrons savoring their final sips. The keeper would begin the ritual of cleaning, carefully washing each tankard and placing it on the shelf for the next gathering. This simple act of care for the tools of the trade was a testament to the dedication behind each brew. The wooden tables would be wiped down and the candles snuffed out, leaving behind a soft glow that lingered in the corners of the room. In those quiet moments, the tavern transformed into a sanctuary of reflection. The echoes of laughter and conversation faded, replaced by a serene stillness. The routine of serving ale, the meticulous measurements, and the gentle interactions created a tapestry of life that continued, night after night, slowly and gently. The cycles of brewing and consumption wove together the stories of countless lives, each tankard a vessel of connection, each sip a shared experience. As we sit with this image, let us breathe deeply and embrace the tranquility of the medieval alehouse. The soft flicker of candlelight dances in our minds, the comforting weight of a tankard rests in our hands, and the gentle rhythm of everyday life envelops us, inviting us to relax and find peace in the simplicity of history. Ow. As the evening deepened, the alehouse settled into a rhythm of its own. The wooden beams overhead creaked softly, a reminder of the countless gatherings that had taken place beneath them. The tools of the brewing trade were, in their own right, a collection of intimate, familiar objects. Each tool, each vessel, held a story, a purpose, and a connection to the past. The brew kettle, a large copper vessel, gleamed faintly in the dim light, its surface reflecting the warm glow of flickering candles. This kettle, often filled to the brim with a mixture of water, malted grains, and hops, played a central role in the brewing process. The precise measurements taken before the boil began were essential. A standard recipe might call for 3 parts water to 1 part malt, with the hops added a little later. Each ingredient was carefully weighed on a wooden scale, the balance teetering gently as the brewer adjusted the measurements, little by little, ensuring consistency in every batch. As the mixture heated, steam would rise slowly, filling the air with a rich, earthy aroma. This was a moment of anticipation, a moment to breathe deeply and appreciate the craft. The process of brewing took hours, sometimes stretching into the early hours of the morning. And then, little by little, the brew would transform, becoming a blend of flavors and scents, waiting patiently to be poured into waiting tankards. Once the brewing was complete, the ale was transferred into barrels. These barrels, often made of oak, were stored in cool, dark corners of the cellar, where the temperature remained steady. Each barrel had a capacity of around 30 gallons, carefully marked on the side with simple notches. This practice ensured that the ale could be measured accurately, providing a consistent experience for those who gathered to drink. When the time came to serve, the tavern keeper would select a barrel, using a small wooden tap to draw the ale. The gentle thump of the tap against the barrel echoed softly in the quiet room. As the ale flowed from the barrel, it would cascade into the waiting tankards, filling them to a predetermined level. The line marked faintly on the inside of each tankard. The height of the pour was crucial. Too little meant disappointment, too much risked spillage. Each tankard, made of pewter or wood, varied slightly in size but typically held about a pint of ale. The standard pint, as it was known, was approximately 20 fluid ounces. This measurement was not merely arbitrary, but rather a result of centuries of practice, slowly refined over time. In taverns, this pint was often served with a small plate of bread or cheese, an accompaniment to the drink that enhanced the experience. The pricing of ale was also a matter of careful consideration. In a bustling town, A pint of ale might be priced at a penny, while a more secluded village tavern might charge only half a penny for the same measure. The tavern keeper would keep a careful ledger, noting the sales of ale and the amount collected from patrons. This ledger reflected the ebb and flow of daily life, a testament to the economic rhythms of the community. And on a busy night, the tavern could serve dozens of customers. Each interaction was a delicate dance, a blend of etiquette and routine. Patrons would enter, shaking off the chill from the outside, and approach the bar with a smile or a nod. They would wait patiently for their turn, a ritual in itself, enjoying the company of others, sharing stories and laughter, while the ale flowed steadily. Ooh. As the evening wore on, the pace of service would shift, slowing down as the number of patrons dwindled. The tavern keeper would take this time to reflect. Little by little, the remaining tankards would be filled, the last customers savoring their ale, content in the knowledge that they were part of something larger. The act of cleaning the tankards was as important as the act of serving. Each tankard would be washed in warm, soapy water, rinsed thoroughly, and set aside to dry. The gentle clinking of metal against metal filled the quiet spaces, a soothing sound that marked the end of the day's work. The tankards, once returned to the shelf, would await the next gathering, ready to be filled once again. The storage of ale was a matter of great care and consideration. Barrels were inspected regularly for leaks and tested for the quality of their contents. A simple taste test was often performed, where the brewer would fill a small cup from the barrel and take a sip, gauging the flavor and consistency. This was a ritual, a moment to connect with the labor of love that had gone into each batch. Mo, Gao, En, Daru, Baruna, Hawasi, Esel, Inosi. Sometimes, if the ale was particularly well received, the tavern keeper might decide to raise the price slightly. This adjustment was often communicated subtly among locals, a whispered note that spread through the community like the aroma of brewing ale. The art of pricing was not merely transactional. It was a reflection of the communal experience, a shared understanding of value and quality. In the back of the tavern, a small storage room held the supplies of the trade. Sacks of malt, barrels of hops, and jars of spices lined the shelves. The air was filled with the earthy scent of grains and the sharpness of hops, a delightful mix that spoke of both craftsmanship and tradition. Pain, dye. Each ingredient had its designated spot, a system developed through years of practice. The brewer would often take a moment to inspect the supplies, ensuring that everything was in order. Little by little, the routine of inventory became ingrained, a way to maintain balance in the brewing process. As the night wore on, the tavern keeper would light a few more candles, their flickering flames casting soft shadows on the walls. The gentle glow created an atmosphere of warmth and comfort. It was a time for reflection, for gratitude, for the simple joys of life shared over a tankard of ale. In these moments, it was easy to lose track of time. The soft crackle of the fire in the hearth, the rhythmic sounds of cleaning, and the quiet hum of conversation created a symphony of tranquility. Each element blended together, forming a cozy tapestry of life in the medieval alehouse. Eddie, with each gentle breath, let us embrace this calm scene together. Let the warmth of the alehouse wrap around us, inviting us to relax deeper into our surroundings. The soft sounds of routine, the echoes of laughter, and the faint aroma of ale linger in our minds, guiding us into a peaceful state of rest. The world outside may bustle and swirl, but here, In this moment, we find solace in the simplicity of history. D. As the evening settled deeper into the alehouse, the tavern keeper turned his attention to the tools of his trade. Each instrument played a crucial role in the brewing process, and each had its place within the cozy confines of the tavern. The wooden ladle, with its smooth, worn handle, hung near the large barrel of ale. It was used to transfer the precious liquid from the barrel into the waiting tankards. The ladle's gentle curve made it easy to pour, guiding the ale into each vessel with a satisfying glug. Nearby, nestled against the wall, stood a sturdy table. This table was home to a variety of tools. There were measuring jugs, often made of pewter or ceramic, marked with graduated lines. Each line indicated a precise measurement, whether it was a pint or a quart. The tavern keeper would carefully select a jug depending on the order, ensuring that the right amount of ale was served. One could often hear the soft clink of glass and ceramic as tankards were filled. A standard pint in this era typically measured around 20 fluid ounces. The tavern keeper had learned over time the importance of measurement, as patrons enjoyed their ales at different paces. Some would savor slowly, while others would drink heartily, and the tavern keeper aimed to cater to both preferences without spilling a drop. In order to keep track of the ale served, a small ledger lay open on the table. The ledger was a simple book, its pages filled with neat, precise entries. Each patron's name was listed alongside the number of tankards ordered. This record ensured that every drink was accounted for, creating a sense of order amidst the jovial chaos of the tavern. Little by little, the tavern keeper would review the ledger, calculating the evening's sales and preparing for the next day. As the night continued, the tavern keeper would occasionally glance at the wooden shelves lining the walls. These shelves held an assortment of storage vessels. There were large earthenware jugs, their sturdy frames ideal for preserving ale. Each jug was marked with a chalk sign, indicating the type of ale it contained. A dark stout might be labeled with a simple au, while a lighter ale bore the mark of a PP. This system was both practical and effective, allowing the tavern keeper to quickly identify and serve the right ale to the right patron. The importance of proper storage could not be overstated. Ale was best enjoyed fresh, and the tavern keeper knew that each jug must be sealed tightly after use. The corks, made of natural cork bark, were carefully placed back into the jugs after pouring. This simple act helped preserve the flavor and quality of the ale, allowing patrons to experience the best of what the tavern had to offer. In the corner, a barrel stood quietly, taking up its rightful place in the tavern. The barrel was a large oak structure, its iron bands gleaming softly in the candlelight. It held the heart of the tavern, the ale itself. The barrel's design facilitated aging, allowing the ale to develop richer flavors over time. The tavern keeper would tap the barrel with a simple wooden mallet, releasing just enough ale to satisfy a thirsty patron. The process of tapping the barrel was methodical, each movement purposeful and precise. The tavern keeper would first wipe the spout clean with a cloth, ensuring no residue remained. He would then insert the spigot, listening closely as the first trickle of ale flowed forth. The sound of ale pouring into a tankard was a satisfying melody, one that echoed softly against the tavern's stone walls. Once the tankard was full, he would set it before the patron with a gentle nod, grateful for their presence. The etiquette of serving ale was steeped in tradition. A polite tavern keeper always ensured that tankards were filled to the brim as a gesture of goodwill. He would often inquire about the patron's preference, a light ale for those seeking refreshment, or a stout for those wishing to savor the richness of flavors. The price of ale varied, of course, creating a delicate balance of affordability and quality. A pint of ale could be priced at around 3 pennies, a sum that was manageable for most patrons. However, the tavern keeper was mindful that some patrons found joy in sharing a tankard, splitting the cost and savoring the experience together. This camaraderie brought warmth to the alehouse, creating a sense of community that echoed through each conversation and laugh shared over a tankard. The tavern keeper would often observe, taking note of the interactions. He understood that the simple act of sharing ale could forge friendships and spark stories that would linger long after the last drop was poured. As the night deepened, the tavern keeper would prepare for the evening's wind down. He would wipe down the tables, his cloth moving slowly and gently across the surfaces. The rhythmic motion became a sort of meditation, a way to reflect on the day's events. The smell of oak and ale mixed in the air, creating a comforting aroma that enveloped the room. In the quiet moments, the keeper would take a seat behind the counter, a well-deserved pause in the evening's activities. He would glance around the alehouse, observing the flickering candles and the shadows they cast. The soft light danced across the faces of patrons, creating a serene atmosphere that spoke of shared histories and laughter. The tavern keeper took a deep breath, allowing himself to feel the satisfaction of a day well spent. He was not just a keeper of ale, but a guardian of stories, memories, and connections. The alehouse was a sanctuary, a place where time seemed to slow down, and the trials of the outside world faded into the background. Each tankard served, each conversation shared, was a small piece of a larger tapestry woven through the years. With the evening drawing to a close, the tavern keeper would begin to prepare for the next day. He knew that the cycle of brewing and serving would continue. The barrels would need to be filled, the tankards polished, and the ledger updated. Each task was a reminder of the rhythm of life in the alehouse, a gentle ebb and flow that created a comforting sense of routine. And so, the keeper would rise once more, ready to tend to the needs of the alehouse. He would gather the empty tankards, each one a testament to the joy shared within these walls. Slowly and gently, he would make his way to the kitchen, preparing for the next day's brew. The warmth of the alehouse lingered in the air, wrapping around him like a soft blanket. The night, filled with the echoes of laughter and the aroma of ale, would soon give way to the quiet of rest. Let us embrace this calm scene together. With each gentle breath, let us allow the warmth of the alehouse to wrap around us once more. In these moments of routine, we find solace in the simplicity of life, the connections made, and the stories shared over a tankard of ale. The world outside may bustle and swirl, but here, in this moment, we find peace in the gentle rhythm of history. Now, as the keeper prepared for the next day's brewing, he would gather his tools and materials with deliberate care. The first task was selecting the right ingredients, for each element played a crucial role in the brewing process. He would carefully measure out the grains, often using a standard measure known as a bushel. A bushel was a unit of volume, roughly equivalent to 8 gallons. This measurement would vary somewhat depending on the region, but it settled into a familiar rhythm among the brewing community. He would take a wooden scoop and fill it with barley, the primary grain for many ales. The grains were coarse and earthy, each kernel a reminder of the land they came from. He would pour the grains into a large slotted wooden trough, known as a mash tun. This tun would soon become a cradle for the grains, slowly absorbing water to create a mash. Next, he would turn his attention to the hops, a small green flower that brought bitterness and aroma to the ale. He would take care to measure these as well, often using a smaller container known as a pint. A pint, equivalent to 1/8 of a gallon, was a familiar sight in the alehouse. It was a comforting benchmark, a gentle reminder of the shared enjoyment of ale. With practiced hands, he would gather just the right amount of hops, typically measured in ounces, to balance the sweetness of the malt. Slowly and gently, he would add these to the mash, knowing that this would influence the ale's character. Would he? Then he. Well, the keeper would then turn to the water. Water, the most crucial of all ingredients, would be drawn from a nearby well or river. It was important to ensure the water was clean and fresh, as it significantly impacted the ale's flavor. He would measure out the water in a wooden bucket, often a standard size of 3 gallons. This would be poured into the mash tun, where the warm grains and hops awaited. With the ingredients in place, he would begin the process of heating the mixture. The mash tun would be placed over a gentle fire, allowing the heat to seep through the wooden base. The grains would slowly release their sugars, creating a sweet liquid known as wort. This was a delicate balance, requiring careful attention to the temperature, often maintained between 150 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. While the wort was brewing, the keeper would take a moment to prepare the brewing area. He would inspect the barrels, often made of oak, which had been previously used for aging other brews. Each barrel would hold around 30 gallons of ale, but it was the quality of the wood that mattered most. The oak would impart subtle flavors to the ale, enhancing its complexity. He would clean each barrel with a wooden brush and water, ensuring no remnants of past brews lingered. This task required patience, allowing the keeper to connect with the history of the alehouse and the many brews that had come before. Slowly and gently, he would scrub each barrel, his mind drifting to the stories shared over their contents. Once the wort was ready, he would strain it carefully from the mash tun into the waiting barrels. This process required a steady hand and an understanding of flow. He would use a wooden ladle, dipping it into the mash and allowing the liquid to flow through a cloth strainer. This ensured that only the liquid, free from grains, would fill the barrel. The wort would bubble and steam, filling the air with a warm, inviting aroma. The keeper would then add yeast, a magical element that would transform the wort into ale. Yeast, a living organism, would consume the sugars, producing alcohol and carbon dioxide. He would sprinkle just the right amount, typically measured in ounces, into the barrel. This required an understanding of the fermentation process, which would take about 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the temperature and yeast activity. One day, as the wort entered its fermentation phase, the keeper would turn his focus to the storage of the finished ale. He would prepare another space, often a cool cellar, where the barrels could rest. This cellar was essential for the aging process, allowing the flavors to mature and develop. Each barrel would sit quietly, side by side, for months, absorbing the essence of the wood and the air around them. During this time, the keeper would also need to tend to the ale's patrons. He would maintain a precise schedule, knowing that ale was often served at specific times throughout the day. The morning might see the serving of a light ale, perfect for breakfast, while the evening would call for heartier brews. He would clean the tankards, often crafted from pewter or wood, polishing each one until it gleamed in the dim light of the alehouse. The act of cleaning was rhythmic and soothing. A tankard could hold a pint, reminding patrons of their portion sizes. It was customary to fill each tankard to the brim, but the keeper understood the importance of moderation. He would also take note of the prices for each ale, typically set by weight or volume. Commonly, A pint of ale would cost a farthing or two, an affordable refreshment for the working man. Understanding the community's needs, he would keep careful records of sales in a ledger, maintaining a balance between supply and demand. The keeper's day would often begin before dawn and stretch late into the evening. After serving patrons, he would gather their empty tankards, stacking them neatly for cleaning. This was a calming routine, a gentle reminder of the cycle of ale and community. As night fell, the alehouse would quiet down. The keeper would prepare for closing, ensuring that all barrels were secure and that the remaining ale was covered. He would take a moment to reflect on the day, the conversations shared, and the connections forged over a simple tankard of ale. And then, after the last of the patrons had departed, he would extinguish the lanterns, allowing the soft glow to fade into darkness. In this stillness, he would breathe deeply, allowing the weight of the day to settle, knowing that tomorrow would bring the same comforting routine. In this gentle embrace of tradition, we find ourselves lulled into the rhythm of life in the alehouse. The measurements of grains, the careful selection of hops, the warmth of the brewing process, all contribute to a tapestry of daily existence. Each small task, each careful preparation, is a thread woven into the fabric of history. Let us imagine, slowly and gently, the keeper going about his work, the soft sounds of the alehouse surrounding him, the clinking of tankards, the bubbling of wort, and the gentle chatter of patrons. Each sound, a part of the soothing symphony of life, invites us to relax, to breathe, and to settle into the calm embrace of history. In this moment, we can find comfort, knowing that the keeper's work, though seemingly mundane, was essential to the fabric of community life. The alehouse stood as a sanctuary, a place where bonds were formed, stories were shared, and laughter echoed. The rhythmic routine of brewing and serving, a gentle reminder of the passage of time, continues to resonate softly in the quiet of our minds. No. Wow. As we drift deeper into the world of the medieval alehouse, let us focus on the tools and materials that played a silent yet vital role in the brewing process. The wooden mash tun, sturdy and worn, stood as a testament to years of service. It nestled comfortably in the corner of the spacious brewing area, a place where grains would meet water and magic would begin. The tun, typically crafted from oak, measured approximately 8 feet in diameter, and would often hold around 100 gallons of mash. The keeper, skilled in his craft, would begin the process at dawn. When the light was soft and the air was cool, he would gather the barley, perhaps from the local mill. The grains, once soaked and germinated, were dried in a kiln, giving rise to the malt. Each batch was weighed carefully. A bushel of barley, roughly 60 pounds, would be transformed into ale. The keeper would use a scale, a humble device with 2 hanging pans, ensuring the precise measurement of each ingredient. In this calm routine, he would also bring forth the hops. Hops, delicate and fragrant, added bitterness to balance the sweetness of the malt. The keeper would select the finest flowers, weighing them in small increments. A handful of hops, around 2 ounces, would suffice for a small batch, while larger brews might require 4 ounces or more. Each choice was deliberate, and the keeper would breathe deeply as he made these selections, feeling the rhythm of his work. Once the grains and hops were measured, the next step was to heat the water. The keeper would fill a large kettle, perhaps holding around 20 gallons, with fresh water. He would place it over a gentle fire, allowing the flames to lick the metal sides softly. As the water approached a boil, steam would rise, filling the air with warmth. This was a comforting sight, a signal that the brewing was about to commence. When the water reached the desired temperature, usually around 160 degrees Fahrenheit, the keeper would pour it slowly over the grains in the mash tun. This gentle mixing required a large wooden paddle, worn smooth by years of use. The paddle would stir the mixture, allowing the grains to release their sugars into the water. This process, known as mashing, would last about an hour. During this time, the keeper would take a moment to reflect, perhaps enjoying a cup of ale himself, savoring the fruits of his labor. He would listen to the bubbling sounds of the mash, the gentle splashes as he stirred. Each sound was a reminder of the life that filled the alehouse, of patrons waiting eagerly for their drinks. Once the mashing was complete, the next task was to separate the liquid from the solid grains, a process called lautering. The keeper would carefully drain the sweet liquid, known as wort, from the tun. He would use a large sieve-like device, often referred to as a mash rake, to ensure that every precious drop was collected. This process required patience and precision, as the keeper would need to avoid any grain particles from passing through. As the wort collected in a large vessel, he would prepare to boil it once more. This time, the boiling would serve two purposes: to sterilize the wort and to extract the flavors from the hops. The keeper would place the kettle back over the fire, watching the liquid transform as it thickened and darkened. The boiling process typically lasted for about an hour. During this time, the keeper would carefully measure the hops, adding them at different intervals, depending on the desired flavor profile. Some hops would be added at the beginning for bitterness, while others would be introduced nearer to the end for aroma. Each addition was marked with a gentle stir, allowing the flavors to meld together seamlessly. As the hour drew to a close, the keeper would prepare for the cooling phase. He would remove the kettle from the heat and siphon the wort into a cooling vessel. This cooling was a crucial step, as yeast would soon be introduced. The keeper would gently swirl the liquid, allowing it to cool evenly. In the cool of the evening, the air filled with the rich aroma of brewing. The keeper would take a moment to catch his breath, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over him. He understood that this routine was not just about the ale itself, but about the connections forged in the alehouse. Once the wort reached a suitable temperature, around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the keeper would add the yeast. This tiny organism, often overlooked, was the true hero of the brewing process. The yeast would consume the sugars from the wort, producing alcohol and carbonation as it worked. The keeper would sprinkle the yeast over the surface, watching as it slowly spread, like a fine dust, settling in the air. After this, the wort would be left to ferment. This fermentation phase could take anywhere from several days to weeks, depending on the type of ale being brewed. During this time, the keeper would remain attentive, checking on the progress regularly. He would gently tap the side of the fermentation vessel, listening for the sounds within, ensuring that all was well. As the days passed, the keeper would prepare for the next step, bottling. When fermentation was complete, the ale would be ready for storage. The keeper would gather clean bottles, often made from glass or clay, ready to receive the fruits of his labor. Each bottle would be filled carefully, ensuring no sediment would disturb the clarity of the ale. He would use a simple funnel, pouring each bottle gently to avoid excessive foam. This meticulous process required a steady hand, and deep focus. The keeper would often hum a soft tune, a melody as old as the alehouse itself, to steady his mind and soothe his spirit. Once filled, the bottles were sealed tightly, often with wax or cork. This preservation was essential, as it would keep the ale fresh for the patrons who would later seek its comfort. The keeper would store the bottles in a cool, dark cellar where they would be left to mature. As he moved through the cellar, he would take a moment to reflect on the work that had been done. Each bottle represented not just the effort of a day, but the tradition of brewing, the community that thrived around the alehouse. He would think of the faces of patrons, the laughter shared, the stories exchanged over a tankard, and he would breathe deeply, allowing the warmth of those memories to wash over him. The keeper understood that this was a cycle, one that would repeat time and time again. The rhythm of brewing was a comforting lullaby, inviting him to embrace the simplicity of his craft. Little by little, he felt his body relax, his shoulders easing as the day drew to a close. He would finish gathering the last of the bottles, placing them neatly on the shelves, ready for the next gathering. And then, little by little, as night fell, the alehouse would quiet. The fire would crackle softly, and the keeper would settle into the comforting embrace of routine, knowing that tomorrow would bring the same soothing rhythm of life. As the keeper settled into the evening's calm, his thoughts turned to the tasks ahead. The brewing process was delicate, a medley of time and attention, and he took pride in every detail. He would first gather his tools, each one a staple of his craft. The measuring jug, with its smooth, curved lines, would come first. This jug, made of sturdy clay, held precisely 1 quart. He would fill it carefully, ensuring the measurement remained true. And then, he would reach for the grain. The grains were carefully selected, a blend of barley and wheat, each contributing to the ale's character. He would weigh out exactly 5 pounds, a rounded amount that had been established through years of trial and error. This grain would be ground to a fine flour, releasing earthy aromas that filled the cellar with warmth. Little by little, the keeper would pour the ground grain into a large mixing vessel, a heavy wooden tub with iron bands that held it together. He would then add water, approximately 3 gallons, heated to a gentle simmer. The steam would rise softly, enveloping him in a comforting embrace as he stirred the mixture with a wooden paddle, ensuring the grains were fully immersed. The keeper would take his time, stirring slowly and methodically as he watched the milky liquid begin to form. This mixture, called the mash, would sit for about an hour. During this time, he would clean his tools, rinsing the measuring jug and paddle with care. This attention to detail was paramount. A clean workspace meant a pure brew. After the hour had passed, he would draw off the liquid, now known as wort, which was a rich amber color. He would carefully siphon it into a large kettle, where it would be brought to a boil. As it heated, he would measure out the hops, another essential ingredient. He would choose 2 ounces, which would add a fragrant bitterness to balance the sweetness of the malt. Once the wort reached a rolling boil, he would add the hops, watching as they danced and swirled within the bubbling mixture. The kettle would remain over the fire for another hour. During this time, he would occasionally stir, ensuring everything mingled together harmoniously. He would also keep a close eye on the clock, noting the time with precision. And then, little by little, he would pour the boiling wort into a fermentation vessel, a large glass carboy, allowing it to cool. He would take a moment to appreciate the transformation that had taken place. The simple grains and hops, now a fragrant liquid, ready for the next step. Oh. But while waiting for the wort to cool, he would prepare the yeast. Yeast was a wondrous organism, a tiny life form that would work diligently over the coming days. He would measure out one packet, about 11 grams, and mix it with a small amount of warm water, allowing it to activate. This process only took a few minutes, but it was crucial for the brewing success. Once the wort was cool enough, around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, he would carefully pour the activated yeast into the fermentation vessel. With a gentle swirl, he would ensure it was well incorporated, and then he would seal the vessel with an airlock, allowing gases to escape while preventing unwanted contaminants from entering. One, Ali, the keeper would place the fermentation vessel in a cool, dark corner of the cellar, where it would remain undisturbed for the next 2 weeks. During this time, he would check on it regularly, observing the bubbles that would form as fermentation took place, a sign that the yeast was at work. He would note the changes in the airlock, the rhythmic bubbling a soothing reminder of progress. As days passed, he would begin to think about the next steps, bottling the ale, adding priming sugar to create carbonation. He would prepare for the bottling day, gathering clean bottles, caps, and a bottling wand. Each bottle would hold about 12 ounces, a standard measure that patrons expected. On bottling day, he would prepare a clean workspace, laying out all the necessary tools. He would fill a large pot with water, bringing it to a gentle boil to sanitize the bottles. Each bottle would be submerged for at least 5 minutes, ensuring all traces of bacteria were eradicated. And then he would remove the bottles, allowing them to dry upside down on a clean towel. As he worked, he would breathe deeply, appreciating the sense of malt and hops that lingered in the air. Once the bottles were dry, he would measure out the priming sugar, typically around 3/4 of a cup, dissolving it in a small pot of water. This mixture would be added to the cooled wort remaining in the fermentation vessel, gently stirred to incorporate. The keeper would then attach the bottling wand to a clean and sanitized hose, allowing him to fill each bottle with precision. He would fill each one to the shoulder, the gentle glug of the ale a soothing sound in the quiet cellar. And then, little by little, he would cap each bottle, ensuring a tight seal to keep the carbonation trapped inside. This process was meticulous, each cap applied with care, showcasing his dedication to the craft. Once all the bottles were filled and capped, he would store them in the same cool, dark cellar as before. He would place them in crates, stacking them neatly, labeling each crate with the date and type of ale. He knew that patience was key. They would need another 2 weeks to condition, developing flavors and carbonation. During this waiting period, he would often reflect on the importance of consistency. Each brew was a testament to the standards established long before him. He would think of the measurements, the tools, and the carefully honed techniques passed down through generations. Little by little, he would realize that this was more than just a routine. It was a tradition, a connection to the past. He would breathe deeply, feeling the calm of the cellar wrap around him like a comforting blanket. Each bottle represented a promise, a bond between the keeper and his patrons, who would savor the fruits of his labor. As he finished his evening tasks, he would once again feel the rhythm of brewing settle within him. The gentle cycle of creation, patience, and enjoyment would continue, inviting him to embrace the tranquility of the alehouse. He would dim the lights, breathe slowly, and relax his shoulders, ready to drift into a restful night, knowing that tomorrow would bring the same comforting routine. Eh, wow. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the quaint village, the alehouse settled into a rhythm of its own. The keeper, surrounded by barrels and crates, would gather his tools for the next day's brewing. He took note of his measuring vessels, carefully polished and arranged. Standardized measurements were crucial. They ensured that the ale would maintain its quality and character. Monmo. He would select a set of wooden measuring cups, each marked with its capacity, ranging from a pint to a gallon. These cups, worn smooth by years of use, were not merely functional. They told stories of countless brews. A pint was defined as a vessel holding precisely 20 fluid ounces, a gallon, 128 fluid ounces. The keeper appreciated this clarity, this consistency, as he filled each cup with the ingredients needed for tomorrow's batch. His thoughts would drift to the grains, carefully stored in burlap sacks, each labeled with its type and origin. Barley, wheat, and rye were the foundations of his craft. He would measure 2 pounds of malt for each gallon of ale, slowly pouring it into the mash tun, allowing it to mingle with the warm water. He relished the gentle sounds of grains settling, the soft splashes of water, and the faint aroma that began to fill the air. With each measurement, he would follow a ritual, a sequence honed by years of practice. Little by little, he would add the hops, which imparted flavor and aroma to the brew. He preferred a blend of varieties, each selected for its unique characteristics. The keeper would take note of the quantities, an ounce of bittering hops and half an ounce of aroma hops for a standard batch. He would record these details meticulously in his brewing log, a weathered book filled with notes, adjustments, and reflections over time. Time in brewing was both a friend and a challenge. The keeper understood that patience was essential. Once the ingredients were combined, he would need to let the mixture rest for an hour, allowing the flavors to meld and develop. During this period, he would tidy the alehouse, checking on the barrels that had been aged. Each barrel was numbered and dated, a meticulous record of its contents and the time spent in storage. He would inspect the casks, made from oak, their surfaces smooth and darkened with age. The wood, having absorbed the essence of previous brews, would impart its own subtle flavors to the ales within. The keeper knew that a barrel's capacity was significant. Standard sizes included the hogshead, holding 63 gallons, and the smaller firkin, holding 9 gallons. Each barrel was an investment, a commitment to the craft. As he worked, the keeper would often think of his patrons and the joy his ales brought them. He would calculate the pricing based on the ingredients, the time invested, and the overhead costs. A pint might sell for a silver penny, while a quart could fetch 2. Each price was a reflection of the quality and care that went into the brewing process. The keeper would prepare for the next morning's preparations, ensuring that everything was in order. He would keep the yeast in a cool corner of the cellar, a small pouch of dried culture, ready to bring life to the brew. He understood that yeast was the magic ingredient, the catalyst for fermentation. This tiny organism would transform the sugary wort into a lively ale, bubbling and effervescent. As the evening deepened, the keeper would settle into a routine of cleaning and organizing. He would wash the equipment used for the day's brewing, rinsing each tool thoroughly. The wooden stirring paddle, the ladle, and the fermentation bucket. All needed to be spotless, ready for the next day's work. He would take the time, little by little, to ensure that every piece was returned to its rightful place. He would dim the lights, creating a soft ambience to soothe the spirit. Each flickering candle cast shadows that danced along the walls, a gentle reminder of the passage of time. The keeper would breathe slowly, inhaling the subtle scent of malt lingering in the air. This was the essence of his craft, the heart of the alehouse. Oh. Once everything was cleaned and organized, he would sit for a moment, reflecting on the day. He would think about the process of brewing, which was not just about creating ale, but also about connection. Each brew was a shared experience, a moment of joy for those who gathered to enjoy it. Little by little, he would find solace in this thought. He would take out his brewing log once more, reviewing the recipes and techniques he had crafted over the years. He always found comfort in the familiarity of his routines. Each entry was a snapshot of time, a record of trials, successes, and lessons learned. He would write down any small adjustments for the next brew, ensuring that the journey of improvement continued. The keeper appreciated the value of tradition. It was a thread woven through the fabric of the alehouse. He would think back to the predecessors who had shaped this craft long before him, the men and women who had toiled in the shadows of the brewing process. They had established the measurements and techniques that he now followed so diligently. The keeper would smile, grateful for the legacy he was part of, however small. As he closed his logbook, he would take a moment to listen to the soft sounds of the cellar, the gentle drip of condensation, the faint rustle of burlap, the quiet hum of fermentation beginning. Each sound was a reminder of the life unfolding around him, the life he nurtured with care and patience. With the evening winding down, he would prepare for the rest that awaited him. He would dim the lights further, creating an atmosphere of warmth and tranquility. He would breathe deeply and slowly, settling into the peacefulness that enveloped him. He would relax his shoulders, feeling the weight of the day lift away. Why? The keeper understood that tomorrow would bring the same soothing routine, a cycle of creation, patience, and enjoyment. Little by little, he embraced the calm surrounding him, ready to let the comfort of the alehouse embrace him like a cozy blanket. With that thought, he would prepare for rest, knowing that the quest for consistent brews would continue quietly and methodically, as it always had. No. As the keeper settled into his evening routine, he was reminded of the tools and materials that played an essential part in his daily tasks. The wooden ladle, polished smooth from years of use, rested against the edge of the large brewing vat. It was a simple tool, yet it held great significance. Each dip into the bubbling liquid was a careful measurement, a thoughtful process. The ladle had a specific capacity, measured in pints, as was customary in the alehouse. This standardization ensured that each serving was consistent, and patrons could enjoy the same taste, sip after sip. He would begin the next day's preparations early in the morning. The sun would rise slowly, casting gentle light on the cobbled street outside. The keeper would rise with it, stretching his limbs awake. He would gather the grains, barley and hops, each stored in burlap sacks, marked with labels to indicate their origin and quality. The grains were particularly important, as they would determine the flavor profile of the ale produced. Selecting the right grains was a process that required careful consideration. The keeper would hold the sacks, feeling their weight and texture. He would examine the grains, taking note of their color and smell. Each choice was critical, as the measurements dictated the balance of sweetness and bitterness in the final brew. Once the grains were selected, he would weigh them on a sturdy wooden scale, the kind that creaked slightly under the weight of its purpose. The scale had been in the alehouse for generations, and its brass weights were polished from frequent use. He would take his time, adjusting the weights with a gentleness that reflected his respect for tradition. After measuring the right amount of grains, usually around 10 or 12 pounds for a standard batch, he would pour them into a large basin filled with water, the water drawn from a nearby well. This well was known for its purity, and the keeper took great pride in this detail. The water was a crucial part of the process, helping to extract the sugars from the grains. He would stir the mixture slowly, ensuring that each grain was thoroughly soaked. The stirring process was rhythmic. Round and round he would go, the water swirling around the grains, the sound of splashing soothing and steady. It would take about an hour for the sugars to dissolve adequately. During this time, he could hear the soft sounds of the cellar, the drip of moisture from the ceiling, the quiet creaks of the wooden beams, the gentle sigh of the fermentation barrels waiting for their turn. Mazi! As the grains steeped, he would prepare the next steps, gathering his tools for the boiling process. The large copper kettle, gleaming in the dim light, was set upon the fire. He would check the flames, ensuring they were steady but not overwhelming. The kettle was essential for boiling the mixture, and he took care to ensure it was properly cleaned after each use. While waiting for the water to heat, he would take a moment to reflect on the measurements that governed his craft. Each ale recipe required precise quantities of hops, and the keeper had learned over time to adjust these measurements based on the season and the quality of the ingredients. Too few hops would leave the ale flat, while too many would overpower the delicate balance he sought. Once the water reached a gentle boil, he would carefully pour the grain mixture into the kettle. It was a slow, deliberate process, ensuring that no grain escaped. He would then add the hops, measuring them with care. Typically, he would use about half a pound for a batch of ale, noting that the type of hops influenced the aroma and bitterness. With the ingredients now combined, he would stir the mixture again, feeling the warmth radiate from the kettle. The brew would simmer for some time, usually around an hour, while he kept a watchful eye on the bubbles rising and falling. The air around him would fill with the rich scent of malt and hops, a unique aroma that lingered like a warm embrace. During this time, he would take the opportunity to clean his tools, wiping down the ladle and washing the scales. It was a simple task, yet it brought him a sense of satisfaction. Each item had its place, a designated spot in the alehouse, a piece of the larger puzzle that made up his daily life. After the boiling, he would let the mixture cool slightly before transferring it to a fermentation barrel. The barrel, carved from sturdy oak, had been seasoned over the years, absorbing the flavors of previous batches. As he poured the brew into the barrel, he took care to ensure that it was smooth and even, avoiding splashes that might waste precious ale. Next, he would add the yeast, a vital ingredient. He would sprinkle it gently over the surface, letting it settle in softly. Yeast was an essential companion in this journey, transforming sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. He understood its importance, appreciating the delicate balance of nature that played out within the barrel. The fermentation process could take anywhere from a few days to several weeks, depending on the temperature and the type of ale being produced. During this time, the keeper would monitor the barrel closely, checking the airlock to ensure that the gases could escape without letting any unwanted contaminants in. Diwal. He would record the temperature and specific gravity of the brew in his logbook, noting the changes each day. This meticulous attention to detail was part of the tradition, a practice handed down through generations of brewers. It was a gentle reminder that the quest for consistency was an ongoing process, one that required patience and understanding. As the days passed, he would find solace in the routine. Each morning he would inspect the barrels, listening for the gentle bubbling that indicated fermentation was active. The soft sounds filled the air with a sense of life, a reminder that he was not merely brewing ale, he was nurturing something greater than himself. With every check, he would feel a sense of connection to the past, to those who had come before him. They had faced similar challenges, their hands stained with the grains and hops, their hearts filled with the same dedication. This unbroken chain of tradition wrapped around him like a cherished memory. Little by little, he would pour out small samples for tasting, checking the flavor and clarity. The keeper knew that tasting was an art form, requiring gentle sips and thoughtful reflection. Each sample offered insight, revealing the ale's character, its sweetness, its bitterness. He would savor these moments, letting the flavors dance on his palate and taking care to note the results in his logbook. Each entry was a page in the ongoing story of the alehouse, a testament to the keeper's commitment to his craft. As evening approached, he would settle down again, embracing the familiar calm of the cellar. He would dim the lights, creating a serene atmosphere, and breathe deeply, letting the day's work settle within him. He would stretch out his limbs, relax his shoulders, and allow himself to drift into a state of peaceful reflection. With each breath, he would embrace the rhythm of the day, the gentle cadence of brewing that echoed through the alehouse. And so, as the hours passed, the keeper would find rest once again, knowing that the cycle of creation continued, quietly and methodically, as it always had. No. In our gentle exploration of medieval ale measurement standards, we trace the winding paths of tankards, pints, and quarts, slowly revealing the nuances of consistency and variation in brewing practices. We meandered through the historical taverns, where patrons would gather, and the careful attention given to each pour, each measure, and each crafted brew. Little by little, we learned how local customs shaped the way ale was enjoyed, and how the quest for uniformity often led to perplexity rather than clarity. As we settle into this quiet space, envision a soft room enveloped in silence, where the night wraps around you like a warm embrace, and your body finds repose. If you enjoyed this soothing journey through time, consider liking, subscribing, or sharing your thoughts in the comments. Remember to turn on loop so the calming rhythms accompany your dreams.